Before she was ever queen, powerful men tried to decide her future for her. They claimed her life already belonged to the church, that she was never meant to marry, never meant to rule. If they were right, England would never have her as queen. This is the story of how the church tried to decide her fate before she ever wore the crown. History remembers her as Matilda of Scotland, but before that name ever meant queen, the church tried to decide whether she was allowed a future at all. What matters is not the title she eventually held, but how close she came to losing everything before it existed. Long before crowns, titles, or royal ambition entered the conversation, her future was already being shaped quietly and without her consent. As a child, she was placed inside religious walls, not as exile, not as punishment, but as preparation. For noble families, this was considered sensible. Religious houses were places of discipline and control. They removed daughters from public life and trained them in obedience long before they learned choice. Inside those walls, time moved differently. Days followed rigid routines. Prayer replaced preference. Silence replaced independence. She wore religious clothing. She followed religious customs. She lived among women whose lives were permanently devoted to God. And in that environment, perception mattered more than intent. To the outside world, the difference between being raised for the church and being claimed by it was almost invisible. Once a girl was associated with religious life, many assumed her future had already been decided. Not by her, but for her. That assumption would later become dangerous. No formal decision was ever announced, but no denial was offered either. And silence allowed belief to grow. Whispers hardened into expectations. Expectations hardened into claims. Claims slowly transformed into authority. People began speaking as though her fate was settled, as though her life already belonged elsewhere. And when belief spreads widely enough, it begins to feel permanent. The danger was not rebellion. She had not resisted. She had not defied anyone. The danger was that others believed resistance was no longer an option. Because once society decides a life belongs to an institution, taking it back looks like disobedience, even if no vow was ever given. For a long time, the question remained theoretical, uncomfortable, unresolved, but ignored. Until power entered the equation. A marriage proposal appeared. Not romantic, but strategic. This union promised stability for the kingdom itself. It could legitimize rule and secure succession. Suddenly, her future mattered. And the moment her name entered those negotiations, everything slowed. The church stepped forward. Old assumptions were reopened. Her childhood placement reinterpreted. Her religious upbringing reframed as obligation. Clergy began asking questions that carried consequences. Had she already been claimed? Had she already given herself to God? And if she had, no marriage could be valid. No crown could follow. Her future collapsed into a single question she had never chosen to answer. This could no longer remain quiet. Her status was questioned openly, formally, publicly. She was summoned to speak for herself. Imagine the moment, a room heavy with authority, men whose decisions shaped kingdoms, a silence so thick it pressed against the chest. Everything depended on what she said next. She denied taking final religious vows, not cautiously, not indirectly, but clearly. She explained that she had lived within religious walls, followed religious routines, worn religious clothing, but had never surrendered her future to the church. This distinction mattered, but belief mattered more. If they doubted her, there would be no appeal, no compromise, no second chance. Failure here meant erasure, no marriage, no crown, only the quiet disappearance of a future rewritten by others. After she spoke, nothing happened. No announcement, no reassurance, no timeline. And that silence was not neutral. Her future hung suspended, not because a decision was impossible, but because delay itself applied pressure. Every day without an answer worked against her. She could not prepare for marriage. She could not plan for rule. She could not defend herself again. She had already spoken. Now she could only wait, while others debated what she was allowed to become. This was power in its quietest form, not refusal, not punishment, just uncertainty. And uncertainty kept control firmly in their hands. The danger was not only the crown. If the church ruled against her, the consequences went much further. Her reputation would collapse. A woman declared bound to religious life who attempted to marry would be seen as disobedient, even immoral. There would be no second proposal, no alternate path to influence. Her future would narrow to one outcome: quiet removal from public life. Not because she chose it, but because authority decided she no longer had a choice, and everyone involved understood that risk. That is why the verdict mattered so much. This was never only about one woman. It was about control. If the church allowed her to marry, it created a precedent. It meant religious upbringing did not permanently cancel agency. It meant institutions could not claim ownership of a life based solely on placement and expectation. That idea was dangerous, because power depends on permanence. If one woman could step outside the future assigned to her, others might follow, and power hates exceptions. After investigation, debate, and judgment, a decision was reached. The church accepted her claim. She was declared free to marry. The path to the crown reopened, but the approval was not generous. It was cautious, conditional, measured. Nothing about it felt like trust. It felt like permission, temporary, revocable, fragile. Soon after, she married. And through that marriage, she became queen. Becoming queen did not end the scrutiny. It intensified it. Every action was watched. Every silence interpreted. She was expected to be obedient and authoritative at the same time, humble yet commanding, devout yet powerful. A contradiction she could never escape. The church did not retreat. It adapted. Its influence remained close, not confrontational, but constant. Her power existed, but only within boundaries defined long before her coronation. Her life exposes a truth history often avoids. That power moves first. That consent comes later, and sometimes not at all. She became queen, but only after surviving a system that nearly erased her future. And that is why her story matters. Because long before the crown touched her head, her fate had already been put on trial.